Good morning, everybody. This is Dr. Mel, your soul scholar, curator of learning spaces that are equitable, that are healing centered, and that are engaging for our young scholars. I am excited for our last session of the Warm Demander series. If I had the sound effects, it would be going boom, 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 and all the things, right? We're excited. I'm excited. Okay. It's early in the morning. It's a Saturday, but I am excited to present this information to you all because the value and the beauty of this information is that being a warm demander is the state of being you must be in to call yourself a culturally responsive educator or a culturally responsive leader or a culturally responsive social worker, counselor, paraprofessional. Whatever fills in the blank after culturally responsive requires your state of being to be a warm demander. There is no way around it. There is no sugarcoating it. It is straight to the point, no chaser. So I am going to go over those. I'm going to share this out on my personal Facebook so that we can share this message out. If you're watching, say, hey, what's up? Tell me where you're watching from so I can know who is in the audience, who is in the internet world. Who are you if you're watching? Also, let me know or go ahead and share this out. I would love for you to share this out to about 5 people. So I'm trying to get this on. Let me see. Let me go back. Oh, here it is. All right, boom shakalaka. So let me share this to my feed. Okay, I know what I gotta do. Give me a second, y'all. And I'm also trying to give people a chance to come in. Here it is. All right, so let me share it. Tap in for our last session. Boom. All right, we got it. So we are coming in. Let's see somebody else. Did somebody else share? I don't know. All right, cool. So we're here. I'm going to keep Facebook open because sometimes I can't see the Facebook comments and people make comments and I want to be able to respond. All right, so the Warm Demander series, let's review what we talked about for the last 3 to 4 weeks because we've been in this series and I love to do series when I'm talking about culturally responsive teaching because the work is dense. It is not a simple cut and dry because we talk about everything from teacher identity, which is very important, which is what we're talking about today, but we also weave in best practices. So I'm not just giving you things that will tell you more about how you should show up. Yes, I'm giving you that, but I'm also giving you the strategies to know how to actually make this practical. That's the thing that we have to know and understand about culturally responsive teaching is that the work is practical. It's not all theory based. And so the goal of us as warm demanders, those who practice culturally responsive teaching, our goal is to close the instructional equity gap. I heard Zaretta Hammond say that I watched many of her videos and podcasts and all the things. So I don't remember what she was on, but when I heard that, it changed my mindset forever, just along, or just as her book did for me as well, Culturally Responsive Teaching in the Brain. I dived so deep into that understanding because it put the light bulb out where it was a flicker in my soul. It like turned it all the way on because I thought about all these achievement gaps and opportunity gaps and all the things that we hear in reference to how our Black students, our brown students are performing lower academically, but performing higher in behavioral and disciplinary infractions, getting suspended, getting detention, getting rolled up, getting put out of class, all of those things. And so that made me think about if we understand, because I've seen it happen for me. I've taught in the classroom for more than 10 years. I was an instructional coach, and I saw in my time of working in my classroom that the students who everybody thought were the worst. Don't act like y'all didn't talk about it in the teacher's lounge, or you didn't hear. Maybe you didn't talk about it, but if you weren't talking about it, you definitely heard conversations about that child. And I always had that child or those children in my class. I talk about this a lot. I left education, or not left education, I left one school to go to another, but I didn't get hired until October. I came in the end of October to an eighth grade class. I'm at a predominantly Black school and brown school. So we have some Latino students that also made up the population, but majority Black school. And so these kids that I had previously had a teacher, she was Black. But, and this is why I say, just because you are Black does not mean these things are automatic in you. We all need concerted effort to be warm demanders. We need strategic and intentional planning and reflection, and shifting in our ways of being to be a warm demander. Y'all, they had threw shoes at this teacher. They had this teacher crying. She quit. After October, she couldn't do it anymore. So everybody was prefacing me about how it's going to be. And mind you, I had worked at this school a few years before. And then I left because they closed down the intervention positions in the whole district, which made no sense to me. We had smaller classrooms. I was the literacy interventionist. We were making moves, but they closed it down district wide. That's a whole nother conversation. So I came in and I got to know these kids. I came in, I built relationships, I was firm, and I earned the right to demand. Do you think those students threw one shoe at me? Not one time. Did we have struggles? Oh, yes. We had a lot of coming to Jesus conversations, a lot of coming to Jesus meetings because the struggle became real. But those became my most loved students. I can see them right now at the local Walmart, or see them out at the mall, or see them just anywhere out in the city. And some, like one of them joined on my live last night on Instagram. I see them, and I always am embraced with so much love from that class, from that group of students, really, because it was middle school all day long. But I'm thinking about my first period because they were really, really my most challenging group that whole year. But we got together because I was a warm demander. I didn't tote my control and authority over them. I didn't demand before relationships that they show up a certain way. I called them higher to the standards that I saw that they could meet, meaning I saw the excellence that was capable in them. I saw the brilliance that could shine in them. I saw the genius that could come forth in them. And I called them through a pedagogy of love. I called them higher to that. I didn't come in and say, "This is my classroom. Y'all gonna do what I say. I don't play those games." I didn't do that. I did not do that. I was firm. I was fair. I gave grace. I had conversations. I had one-on-ones. I met mamas and grandmamas and aunties who was taking care of the babies, because it's not always mom and dad that's taking care of the babies. I've had very many different family structures in all of my years of teaching. And so I got to know all of them, called them on a positive note. Before I called them on anything negative, I introduced myself. I gave it a few days so I could have something positive to say about their child. I called them, introduced myself. I let them know something positive, a strength I noticed in their child. And I also let them know I am your team member. I'm tapping in while you at work. I've tapped in. I'm a part of the village. I have a village mentality. I love all children. I believe they can all actualize their genius in real time with me. And I need your help to make it happen. And I got those parents on my side. I had their phone numbers on speed dial. So they knew I was with them to see the betterment of their child. So as I demanded through my warmth, I didn't have pushback from parents. I never had parents call in all of my years. Now, this one I can brag about. In all of my years of being in the classroom, never have I had a parent complain about me. Never have I had a parent complain about me because they knew based on our relationship from parent to teacher that I was there to help join forces with them to see greatness come out of their child. And I would show that, I would tell that, I would honor that, right? And then when times came and children were children, they did the things that children did. I called those parents for backup. And they backed me up almost every single time. Almost every single time. You got a couple that wouldn't answer the phone just because everybody was calling them. So they didn't know if it was me or if it was another classroom. They just saw that extension from the school. Some of them wouldn't answer for anybody. But for the most part, I had complete buy-in because I set it up to where I warmly embraced a relationship so that I could earn the right to demand. Y'all understand what I'm saying? So we've talked about this warm demander. One of the qualities is you earn the right to demand engagement and effort because the seed of genius is there. Even if you've got to do a lot of scaffolding, even if you've got to find out where that student is and push them up and accelerate that learning with them in different ways, maybe tier 2 and tier 3 strategies, not just tier 1, because they have some special needs that came in before you were there. Whatever the case is, you earn the right to demand. That's the biggest one out of all the qualities that Zaretta Hammond brings forth about being a warm demander, meaning the identity of a culturally responsive educator. Earning the right to demand to me is one of the most important because once you've earned it, you've developed rapport, you've built that rapport, you've validated and affirmed that student, you've made connections, you created a space of belonging, of inclusivity. Your students feel as though they have a space to be in your classroom, in your school building if you're an administrator, in your district if you're a district personnel, all because of your commitment and persistence and dedication to showing up as a warm demander. And also unpacking what that means in conversation when you are talking with colleagues who may be struggling in different areas. Because when I hear negativity, when I used to hear that, I noticed from my ears, that's an indicator that there is a struggle. Somebody needs support. When you're complaining about this same child or this same class, or you're having trouble with this and trouble with that, that's a cry as an educator for support. That's all I see. That's all I hear. And it could be support in different areas. So today, we're going to focus on our last two components of being a warm demander. So we will start with you hold high standards and you offer emotional support, right? And I've talked about this kind of all along the way, but as a warm demander, you don't think in your mind and believe in your soul that your students cannot do anything. That's not the language of a warm demander. A warm demander doesn't say my child can't read or this child can't do a thing. No, that doesn't come out of our mouth. That's not our language. We notice what they can do and build them to what they need to be able to do because we believe in our capacity as a warm demander, as a soul scholar, as a culturally responsive educator who knows how to teach based on brain science and embedding culture. We know, oh, you can come in and be on a second grade level and I teach an eighth grade class. Oh, that's good. This child can do this. I'm not going to subject the way I talk about this child to saying only things about the grade level they're on. No, I'm going to say the skill set. I'm going to say what I see. I'm going to say things about their character, who they are as individuals, who they are within the community of the classroom environment. And then I got the sauce. I got the juice. Me and this student, oh, we making gains this year. That's the attitude you've got to have. It can't be this defeatist mentality like, oh my God, all the students in my class are so low. I hear that so often. And I get, let me be real, I get that there's pressure. I get that there is pressure from administration, from the district to have students at this certain level and perform for these tests. But like I told people on my IG Live last night, we've got to develop a boldness in our spirit where number one, we can show the research. So that means you may have to look at a couple of articles and show these people you know what you're talking about. Culturally responsive teaching has shown evidence of working. Social emotional learning has numerical, because they love the numbers. So you got to give the people what they want. It shows numerical data that it increases achievement, learner confidence, and competence. Show them articles about how your state of mind, your confidence level impacts your learning outcomes. And then show them the research in your classroom. That's the best kind. Show them that this is where my student or students began, and these are the gains. I'm not focusing on an end goal. I'm focusing on the progress. And if you, as you're speaking to whomever, have other ways to support me in accelerating that learning, I'm open to partner with you. Because they may have some ways of being and some ideas that could pump up that student and accelerate their learning. And if that's our purpose, if our calling is to ensure that our students meet this high standard that we have, and they do it while providing emotional support, I don't mind taking a step back. And I hope that you could also decenter the ego to not take it personal that someone's trying to come in and take over your class, trying to come in and take over and tell you you don't know what you're doing. No, if the point is, I've got something that can help your babies, I've got something that I can partner with you in to accelerate the learning because you're doing good. We see the gains, but we can maybe speed that up. Then yes, I need you to be willing. I need you to decenter the ego. I need you to think about why you're in this thing to begin with. Because sometimes we get caught up in the monotony, we get caught up in the day to day, we get caught up in the power struggle and the dynamics that are passed down to us from the higher power structures, right? Whether you believe it or not, if you're not actively, excuse me, if you're not actively resisting the dynamics of the power structures that hoard power instead of sharing it, you will begin to take those qualities and dynamics on into your character and your professional stance. And then you will be a power hoarder in terms of this is my class. Nobody can come in and help. No one can come in and partner with, not even my students, not even their families. It's all about me. We've got to be mindful. That's why this state of self-awareness, the first competency of social emotional learning, is so vital for us as adults because we've got to be able to recognize the power structures and recognize what is toxic about them and how they're hoarding power through a sense of urgency, through perfectionism, through a right or wrong and not a both and. We've got to be able to recognize that so that we remain diligent in not replicating that. You understand? If we're not going to be diligent in that pursuit, it will overwhelm us to a space where we look to just conform to get along instead of holding the right standard to say, I believe in the genius of every one of my students. I believe in the love of their families and their communities. Therefore, my belief system will inform my behavior and the way I engage, meaning I will be a warm demander. I will show up warm, firm, maybe having to, show a little tough love. And when I say tough, I don't mean tough in a way that's shameful, humiliating, and degrading. Because sometimes people confuse what tough love is. That's not that's not this. We're never shaming, humiliating, and degrading students in the guise or in the name of tough love. That's not it. Not it. But we're firm. We're speaking life into them and telling them, no, this is what I expect of you, and I don't accept anything less than. I'll support you to get to, but I'm not accepting anything less than your excellence, because that's what we believe in. So when we're talking about holding high standards, we don't allow students to act a fool in the hallways because we don't want to write them up. See, this is the thing. And I was talking to an instructional coach a couple of weeks ago at my daughter's school. And he and I were both coaches at the same time when I was in the district, and he's still coaching now. And, we were talking about restorative practices and how there are districts that want to engage in that work, or schools that want to engage in that work. So they invest in a consultant or a company that comes out and does like one or two trainings, but then they don't maintain connection with that company or with that team to help them bring those restorative practices into the normal culture as a way of being. So what happens is they think they can do it, meaning they've never done it before. You've not been trained. So some things we've got to know, hey, this is not my strong suit. Although I believe in the power of restorative practices, maybe I haven't had enough training. I haven't attended enough sessions. I haven't dug deep, researched, and learned more about this stuff. So I need support. Same thing I tell people who want to be warm demanders, who say they want to be culturally responsive, but don't understand anything about information processing in the brain. You got to make it make sense. And you got to step outside of this I got it mentality, I can do it by myself mentality and ego, and lean into community, lean into hiring folks. Excuse me, y'all, the allergies are starting to act up. But lean into support from other people that do know, so that they can guide you through. Because as I was talking to this coach, he made the point that it made things worse trying to use restorative practices, because now people were using them and all kind of havoc was happening. Students were not taking accountability. There was not this great atmosphere of community. There was not a strategic way in which students engaged in the restorative process. It was just free willy-nilly, under the guise of we're trying to be restorative practices centered. Not gonna work. Not gonna work. And that's the same thing that happens here when we're talking about being a warm demander and encouraging this productive struggle. Understanding that that's our next point. As we are warm demanders, we encourage productive struggle. And maybe you don't know how to do that, because if we don't hold this high standard, we will allow a little bit of struggle to cause us to shift our entire lesson. We will allow a little bit of struggle with students who are learning to regulate. I don't know why we tend to think that elementary and middle school and even high school students, when we got grown adults who are consistently dysregulated, hello, we expect children to be able to self-regulate. Get yourself together. This is a teaching opportunity, my people. Where we are in education, when you are teaching from pre-K on up, this is an opportunity to teach students by providing that emotional support. And this is why I say culturally responsive teaching is not separate from social emotional learning. They go together, they're espoused, they go together. Just like in this last one, it says holding high standards and offer emotional support. So my standards for academic and emotional and character outcomes, like behavioral outcomes, they all go together. But I'm offering emotional support whether we're directly having SEL lessons, which should be happening, whether we are talking about examples of different character traits throughout the day, and that's embedded in our curriculum. So we're using models of, if we're talking about perseverance, or models of empathy, if we're talking about that, or models of love, or models of genuine community care. Whatever we're talking about, we're embedding it in our curriculum. So we're providing opportunities for them to work with these emotional supports. And then in the moment, we're giving them support. We're so connected to our students. Thank you, Tony, that we understand when they're feeling frustrated, but we've got a toolbox of strategies to connect with them to mitigate the stress, because all stress is not bad stress. Stress can come in and be an accelerant for us trying to learn to, what do I have to figure out? What's going on? I need to be alert. I need to pay attention. But sitting in stress too long, prolonged stress, is not good for the body and the nervous system. So we've got to figure out, how can we do that through productive struggle. So I'm going to give you a few. I did a bit of research to come up with some new things that are out there, but also some things that have always worked for me in my time of teaching and learning. Because I, as a consultant and an instructional coach, I'm trying to give you what I know has worked, but also keep us on the cutting edge, because we understand that we're getting new generations, we're getting different personality types. Everybody's talking about these new COVID babies and how different they are, and all of these different attributes of people. And people are always evolving. Culture, therefore, is always evolving. So we like to stay on the cutting edge. So productive struggle, before I get into that, I want to focus in on how productive struggle, or what productive struggle really is, because this is our components of being a warm demander. You encourage it. So with productive struggle, what you are doing is you are encouraging students to persevere through hard content, but you're offering them resources and tools to make it through on their own, right? The goal is not for you to hold their hand the entire time, every time. And depending on their level of um, learner independence, meaning how able they are to self initiate tasks, how able they are to follow multi step directions. So, looking at their executive functioning skills, right? Being able to observe and see that in real time will give you the data you need to know, how many touches do I need to make with this student? How engaged do I need to be? Do I need to do some tier two, where after I've done whole group, maybe I get this group of students in a small group to help them along the way and wean them off in the next 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks, but I'm weaning them off. The goal is not to hold their hand all year long. That is stressful for you as the educator. So if you are taking into account, I'm putting them in small groups. This is what we're doing. This is how it's going. I'm trying this new, right? You're being very strategic and intentional about what you're doing, so you can accurately measure the impact of what you're doing. Because sometimes in education, we're doing so many things, we're trying new stuff, but then something works and we see the aha moment, but we can't pinpoint what worked. So then when we see the same behaviors come up in another student, or similar attributes, we don't really know what strategies work the best, right? And different strategies can work differently with different students. So, but we can have a toolbox of things that are like, okay, I resonate with this strategy. I've learned it. I can do it well. And now I am able to do this with students and see change, see things happen, right? Because when we're talking about productive struggle, the goal is to develop these cognitive routines, thinking routines, habits of mind, is not to just simply be able to recall facts. It is about being able to engage in habits of mind. What are the habits of mind? And you all probably know these and have used these. Perspectives is one. So looking at whose perspective is being taken, whose perspective is also being silenced or erased, and what does it all mean, right? How does it inform what I'm learning about? Similarities and differences is another habits of mind. So these are your T charts, your Venn diagrams. These are your other games that you can play of sorting and seeing how things are alike and different, right? Similarities and differences. The ecosystem. So looking at whole to part. How is this concept, this idea a part of a larger system? These are the habits of mind that we should be building. Sometimes we're so focused on content because we've got testing coming up. Like, let's be real. We got testing coming up. So we really want to drive in skill sets. But if we focus on driving in thinking routines, the skill sets will stick easier. But you've got to develop strong habits of mind. The last habit of mine is relationships. So, how are things connected? Is there a flow chart that students can create to connect ideas? Right? So, these habits of mind are the purpose because once the habits of mind are there, we find it easier. The myelin in the brain, it's like think about the Wizard of Oz. And in the Wizard of Oz, you have the Tin Man, and he can barely move unless he has what? Oil. Myelin is the oil in our brain that allows for the neurons, which send messages, which communicate, to move faster and more easily and make deeper connections, synapses. That's the fire spark that happens in the brain. So it's able to make those things connected where you have now a web of understanding. You have a depth of knowledge that is increasingly growing because they know how to operate their thinking. Metacognition, the way you think about how you think, right? So thinking about, oh, when I try this strategy, I'm able to remember. So when I use mnemonics, I can remember this quadratic formula. When I use a rap or a chant with my students, they remember. And so these things are making the content stick. And that's the goal of us as educators. So when you're looking at productive struggle, you've got to ask yourself, when you see a student struggling, this is the main question that you need to focus on. Do they get the concept or are they spinning their wheels? Because if they don't get the concept, if they don't have any connection and understanding with what you're talking about, you got to go back. It may be time for you to look at the way you presented it. Because some things, as beautiful as our lesson plans are, as beautiful as our instruction is, everything doesn't work with every student. And we've got to be okay with understanding that it doesn't make you a bad teacher if it didn't stick with every kid, even if it didn't stick with the whole class. I've had plenty of lessons that have bombed, and I thought they were amazing. I sat up and was on the computer for an hour or two with this one day's lesson, and I thought it was going to do what it was supposed to do, but it didn't give what it was supposed to give. So I couldn't put my ego and my pride in front and say, oh, it's just the kids. They just don't know. It was my lesson, or it was my delivery, or it was the lack of structure in the environment that didn't allow the delivery to happen. You got to be able to sit back and see what was it really? And talk to your kids and ask them. And some of those kids, they'll really give you the real deal. Miss, your lesson was good, but I could hardly hear because they was in the back doing this and doing that, right? They'll let you know if it was a structure and environmental issue or if it was a content instructional delivery and structure of the lesson issue. Or no, Miss, it was really confusing when you brought that video. Like I didn't get the point. Like I didn't know why you brought that in. They will tell you. If they feel brave enough, safe enough, because you develop relationship and they know it's okay to challenge you, not disrespectfully, but that means they're thinking on their own. I used to give kids points or candy or whatever accolade I could think of when they found my errors. Not that I made them always purposely, but I praised students for finding my errors because that means you're active in the learning space. Yes, very true, Tony. If we don't give them these skills, then they will become adults who don't have these skills. And we have a cycle that's continuing, right? So if we embrace students thinking for themselves, not being replicators and just those that go along to get along, because those are not the people that impact our world. Think about us as adults. I'm kind of getting off, but it made me think about this. Some of us as adults, especially those of us who may be entrepreneurs, Tony, you might can relate a little bit to this. Those of us who have had to take risk. What is that number one thing that if we're in a coaching group, they work on? Mindset. Mindset. Because we have been conditioned to go along and get along. We've been conditioned to be compliant, good little teachers or good students or good children. Compliance has driven, control has driven our ways of being in American culture for sure. Because those who stand out and step out are generally ostracized, outcast, not welcomed, don't feel like they belong because they're not being like everybody else. So when we go into business, even if we go into a business and we're working as an employee, some of us are so afraid or nervous or hesitant to actually do something bold or try something new or bring something innovative to the space. And that's because we've been trained as a child. We have not been given space to think about these habits of mind and to even engage in what productive struggle means. So when we talk about that in the classroom, you can look and see if kids can get 3 problems in a row correct, they most likely got it, right? So sometimes we don't have to give these. I used to hate to see 25, 30 question worksheets. Like, why? 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 True enough, retrieval of the skill set, so them automating being able to do it is good. But 30 at one time sitting in one space, no. That's not it's not gonna work. Yes, and they give up because I used to. I'm like, okay, I'm tired. My brain is tired. You have given me 25, 30. Sometimes, I mean, it will be a whole worksheet. Y'all remember? I don't know if they still do it now. A whole worksheet full of problems that they would give and tell you that was homework or tell you that. And I'm like, what was the purpose? What was the reason? And so we got to think about why we're doing what we're doing because that's not really encouraging productive struggle. Here are some strategies to enhance the learning and encourage productive struggle, right? Because there are other ways to play with the concepts and make it stick. I think it was in this guise of like one of the strategies being retrieval. So, retrieval being a strategy that helps to use productive struggle will let your kids practice some things, right? So it gives them the opportunity to like, how do you want to say, to strengthen that neural pathway, just like free throw shooters, the more they practice it, you know, the better they get at it because they just keep practicing and they move in another angle. But notice they move to another angle. They don't sit in one spot and only shoot from the line. No, they go over to the 3. They'll go over to the other side, the other. They move it around to let that pathway be flexible, but also strengthened. So one strategy is retrieval, right? Because sometimes the brain will forget things because it's been too overloaded. And it doesn't mean you're overloading always with your instructional content. It could also mean that there are other things they're thinking about. So this is why being trauma informed is so important to our way of being as a warm demander, being in connection with your students to notice what behaviors are indicators that something else is deeper is happening, so that you know how to respond to it and help the student. Because if their brain is so overload and full of thinking about their parents' divorce, thinking about if they're homeless, are they going to stay at the hotel tonight or are they going to their grandmother's house? They're thinking about all these things. So forgetting is a way to free the brain up. The brain is going to survive. It's going to find a way to survive each and every time. So forgetting is one of those ways. So one thing you can do before you teach the lesson is asking them to practice answering some problems or performing some skills, right? Do some fill in the blank, some short answer. Better than multiple choice, because with multiple choice, we're training them to identify correct answers. We don't need that. All these test taking strategies, they talk about just really teaching how to test, not teaching how to learn and think, right? So these open ended questions are going to force these kids to actually think of the answer, right? Another strategy is called interleaving. That means that you are never moving on from a previous concept and just leaving it in isolation. I've talked about this so much, but after I did some research for this live, I found out that it's called a term. There's language to the term of connecting all of what we're learning throughout the entire year. So nothing is in isolation. Everything is like a quilt. Every piece that we get, we knit it together. And we knit together this beautiful quilt of our fifth grade learning in math. And we see how it's a language. We see how it's all connected. Because when you're doing that, what that means is the previous lesson, you're going to bring in a few questions from that. You're not going to let it go. You're going to continue to connect all of what you've been teaching throughout the entire year, because the goal is to move the information into long-term memory. We want these skill sets, we want these intellectual gains to be a part of our long-term memory. So in the brain, you can't leave the stuff behind. Every unit should be building upon itself. So as you go into the next week and the next quarter and the next semester, no learning left behind. No learning is left behind. None. Because now they're going to be able to retrieve from their long-term memory, because the more they are practicing and seeing the relevance, even if you can show how all these things are connected and connected to the world, right? I talked about this in my IG live last night when we're talking about building academic mindset. The last trait is the work has value for me. Students need to see that. So if I can see that I'm learning all these things, I'm just thinking about math because I know I got Tony, the math wise coach. She's amazing. Okay. First of all, so if you need something for math, get it, Tony. She's in the comments on LinkedIn, but she's Tony Peterson Hardy. For those who may be watching elsewhere, find her. She's amazing. But my point is, we get into this idea of isolating our learning and thinking about things as separate and silos. But when we interleave, we can do our whole math class where we can see math as a language. We can see what the message has been and what I've learned about math and how I've learned that it's a part of the real world, right? While I may be working abstractly with problems and formulas, I'm also working concretely with the world around me to see, not just in word problems where I'm putting people's names in. Like, we got to get out of thinking that's culturally responsive. Oh, I made a word problem that included Shaq or Kobe Bryant or LeBron James or whomever they like. And so that should be culturally responsive. That's cool. That's good. But how does this that you're teaching actually show up in the real world as a concept? How does it show up in the real world? How is it a part of engineering or architecture or gardening and farming or the grocery store or the community center or the bridge that they're building? Like, how does it all connect and make sense? Interleaving, right? And they may make more mistakes, but the mistakes are because they're being productive. They're building better roads in their brains. Mistakes are okay in learning because you, as the educator, are going to come in and provide that feedback. Okay, let's get ready to wrap this up. All right, so the next strategy is spacing. And I talked about this before, right? So we've got, let me review. We've got retrieval. So we're using some open-ended questions, frequent practice tests that kind of call on our memories, right? So that we can make things more permanent, because the goal is short to working to long-term memory. And we're not doing multiple choice. We're focusing on filling the blank. I used to love cloze strategy. I think it was CLOZE. So you may have a sentence or a paragraph and you leave some blank and they fill in the blank with the concepts or the ideas or whatever. Then we have interleaving, where we're connecting everything that we've been doing all along the way, because the goal is to get to long-term memory, right? So we don't ever leave our prior learning, our last lesson plan concepts behind. We bring them in to the newness. Yes. Okay, thank you, Tony. I'm glad. That's the goal. Now we talk about spacing. Spacing is showing us that we know this is why they brought in brain breaks. And I don't know why. I know some people were doing brain breaks before, but with COVID, we saw brain breaks be like the thing. And I guess because kids were looking at computer screens longer, and that does something to our eyes and to our brain. But it should have been a natural part of your learning anyway. It should have been a natural part of the lesson plan anyway, because we all need the brain breaks, right? Because students will, there has been research that has shown that students will do better in learning concepts if they do it in briefer and shorter chunks. This is why I use the Ready for Rigor framework, because it says you ignite the students, then you chunk up the content in digestible pieces. Sometimes we're force feeding and we wonder why they keep throwing it up, because we're forcing too much down their throat because we feel the pressure. That's why we got to do the work on ourselves, so we don't feel the pressure and then exact that pressure onto our students. So you chunk it up so they can chew on it, and then you review it, right? This makes sense because if you can chunk it up and you can kind of cut things out within a whole week versus trying to front load so much information, but chunk it up and build every day of the week, you will see better connections. You will see students getting it, right? Because you're not going so fast. I used to hate that in school. I felt like I would get something and it would just go so fast. So you got to be in tune. Now, you don't want to go too slow and bore the students. And this is why, I don't know if it's a scientific term, but I know it was a term in my teacher time that we used a lot. It was called with itness. Like, you got to be with it. You got to feel the pulse of your classroom. You got to know your babies. You got to know your kids. You got to know your young people that are in the classroom. You got to know them. You got to know when the look in their eyes is glazing over with boredom. You got to know when they're tapped out. You got to know when they're engaged and fired up. You got to know. And when you know those things, then you can come in and have culturally responsive teaching, because you're responding in real time to the needs of the students you are teaching. The educational or the academic needs and the emotional needs, because again, they go together. You can't separate emotions from learning. And so this is what a warm demander does. The last part about productive struggle, because a warm demander encourages productive struggle, is that you use mindfulness, right? So you are actually teaching the skill of being present in the moment, being in tune with your body, understanding what happens in your body when you feel excited, when you're anxious, when you're nervous, when you're feeling shame, all of these things, so that you now can help them with tools to mitigate the stress. Because as much as we love our children, our young people that we're working with, we can't eliminate the stresses from their life. We're not their saviors. We don't come in to save the babies. We come to work with them. We come to give them tools. We come to be partners with our young people so that we can do what? Give them what we've been learning, what we're modeling. Okay. That's why I always say it starts with us, what we're modeling, what we're embodying in our own souls so we can share it. That's my framework in my company, Scholars for the Soul. Embody, model, and share. Because if we don't embody this thing, this identity, this understanding is what it means to be a warm demander, being mindful, understanding when we're overstimulated. I do this even at home. I'm like, okay, it's too much noise. I got this going, that going. Like, I can recognize when I am about to be overstimulated, because, or when I am overstimulated, I'm irritable. When I've got too much going on, I'm snappy. So what do? I try to tell people, I try to give them my boundaries. Hey, this is what I'm asking of you, because I know where I'm headed and I'm recognizing what's happening in me. And that's the biggest battle in this life, is recognizing you. Right? So these are things you can be modeling and talking about in front of your kids to show them you're a human with a soul. That's why we're soul scholars, because we're connected with our own journey, with our own walk, with our own emotional intelligence growth and resilience and maturity. And we don't present ourselves as ones who know it all and got it all together. There are spaces where we're flawed, spaces where we are growing, spaces where we are learning, and we're not afraid to share that, because perfectionism is a fallacy. There is no perfect. There is no everybody has it all together. They're lying. If you think of one person who has it all together, and either you're lying to yourself about them or they're lying to you about themselves. But it's a lie. Everybody has a struggle. They may not have a life full of struggles. That's not what I'm saying, because people can experience joy. I experience joy quite often in my life, and I do not have a life of struggle. I have had a life of struggle. I have endured times where I have felt overwhelmed. But in the moment and where I am and where I aspire to continue to be, I am in a perpetual state of peace, joy, and love. So even when I'm challenged, peace, joy, and love override that challenge. But I talk about my journey there because I don't want people to think that you just gonna magically show up and fairy dust is gonna fall from the sky and you just gonna be in peace, joy, and love all the time. No, ma'am, no, sir. It takes work. So we talk about emotional support through this way. We keep it real. Like they say, we keep it 100 with our children, with our young people, so they can see this is a journey. Just like Miss, because you know they love to say Miss. Just like Miss is teaching us and she's doing this and she's doing that. She told us about, you are humanizing yourself so that your students can learn from you. Disciples back in the time of biblical times, they followed the person that they were being discipled by, because they watched their ways of being. They looked at how they lived their life, and then they learned from the words that they said. So when we talk about being disciplined, coming from the word disciple, we're thinking about what model am I showing up as that can help these students to be disciplined? How vulnerable am I willing to be so that I am working from a pedagogy of love? How open am I to connecting with my students, even the most challenging ones, to know that that means they need more love? It does not mean that they want to be defiant. It does not mean that they want to come in and cause chaos in your classroom every day. They probably did not wake up thinking about you. And I'm going to go in here and tear it up unless you created this contention with them and it's a power struggle, then maybe so, yes. But everybody wants to be loved. Everybody wants to show love, but everybody doesn't know how. So as warm demanders, we operate from a pedagogy. Thank you in the comments. We operate from a pedagogy of love, period. And love is going to challenge us to keep loving, to keep being a warm demander. So let me review these few, and I'm just going to call them out. I'm not going to talk about them. But being a warm demander, because this is the last day of the series. If you missed any of them, you're welcome to go back and watch the previous recordings. They should be on my page. Being a warm demander, this is from the work of Zaretta Hammond in Culturally Responsive Teaching in the Brain. So I can't act like I've made this all up. She's an amazing researcher and instructional leader in this educational industry. So I do give credit to her for this work. And this came directly from her book, Culturally Responsive Teaching in the Brain. But I wanted to break it down, have conversation with you all over 4 weeks. Notice how I spaced it out. Notice how I gave you emotional support to talk to your identity and who you are, right? Notice how I connected with the realities of teaching. Because I know sometimes we have these talks and we're like, do they even know what it's like in a classroom? Yes. I am mentoring a teacher right now, and I am blessed to do it because I can have real world experiences that inform me better to come before you and to have other keynote speaking engagements and other professional development workshops. So I'm talking from the real deal. Okay. So being a warm demander, you have explicit focus on building rapport and trust. You use nonverbal ways as well, such as smiling, nod, things like that, right? You're connecting with a nice tone of voice. You're firm, but you're also warm. You may tease a little bit, joke around. That's a warm demander. You are interested in who your students are. So you ask questions about their lives, about the people in their lives. You stay connected with them, right? Then you earn the right to demand. I talked about that a lot today, right? So you're demanding engagement and effort. So you earn that right through time, tenure, dedication, commitment, intentionality, and strategy. And then you're very competent with instruction. So you know your stuff. And when you don't know, you say you don't know, but you go out and seek resources and you figure it out. So you can come back and know. You are well prepared. You spend time on your lessons. You go over things. You try to, anticipate what things may work and don't work. You're very competent with the technical side of instruction. And then today we talked about you holding high standards academically and emotionally, and you're providing those emotional supports. You know how to scaffold these dependent learners because the goal is to make them or to facilitate space where they are now independent learners. They can initiate tasks, they can formulate plans, they can overcome challenges, and you're a last resource. They don't have to call you for everything. You encourage productive struggle. We talked about that today. And you are tough love. You show up in tough love. And remember, I said tough love because I got to be real clear because some people misconstrue tough love. Tough love is never demeaning or degrading, it's never shameful, and it's never humiliating. So if that's your idea of tough love, you need to go back because that ain't it. In plain language, that ain't it. It's never going to shame students in front of others. It's never going to humiliate them, degrade them, or demean them. It's going to call them in with love in a firm way that says, this is what I know you to be, but what I see is not it. Let's work on matching it up. And I'm not letting up till I see the match. I'm not going to let kids run down the hallway and act a fool because I don't want to write them up. No, I'm not going to let kids come in every single day, disrupt the classroom, and we're not going to make a plan. I'm not going to do nothing because I just don't want to write them up, but I'm going to let them go below their genius. No, we expect genius around here. We expect brilliance. And on the days you can't show up like that, I've got supports for you because we don't always have to be on. We don't always have to produce to be valued. Who you are is valuable. How you show up is enough. But we gotta see some work. I gotta see some greatness in you. So I hope this has been a great Warm Demander series. Thank you for those who have came. I am offering what is it? We have a free workshop that's a masterclass for academic mindset on April 1st. So you can, let's see how I can do this. If you are interested in that, I'm going to drop the link to that in the comments so that you can join. It is Saturday. There will not be a lot of open seats because it's going to be this idea of kind of like hot seat coaching where people are going to bring in their lesson plan and you are going to we're going to work through auditing our own lessons to make sure that they're aligned with culturally responsive teaching and embracing, there we go, embracing and embodying what it means to have academic mindset within your content. So I'm going to do that on April 1st from 10 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. So feel free to click that link. It is in the chat and it is free. You can also see on that link there's a free ebook. First Steps to Understanding and Implementing Culturally Responsive Teaching is the red button. Feel free to take a hold of that resource as well. If you are interested in bringing me into your schools, I do professional development. Okay. I do professional development workshops. I do not do one and dones. So I cannot come and do a one-time thing unless it's a keynote, and I'm open to those. I'm excited that I'm starting to do more keynotes now. But in terms of professional development workshops, we work in series. I also provide coaching for your leadership and for your teachers. So feel free to message us at info@scholarsforthesoul.com. We would love to work with you all. You can click the links there and schedule a consultation. Send us a DM message. But otherwise, you all have a great and beautiful Saturday. Get you some rest. Enjoy your day. And we will talk to you later.